That's the friendly fraud.
Yes.
People actually do that.
Yes, so they know.
Yeah.
So there are people who do that for fun. I saw a video, someone saying they do disputes for fun.
Really?
Yes.
I never thought fraud can be friendly.
Yeah, but not friendly to
yeah,
the
it's not
merchant.
friendly to the merchant.
Yes.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Beyond Payment Talks with Network. Today we are joined by the lovely Nyambura Mureithi, who is here to discuss all things chargebacks. Karibu sana Nyambura.
Asante sana.
Please briefly introduce yourself and what it is you do.
My name is Nyambura Mureithi. I work in the operations department, specifically chargebacks, and we handle merchant disputes. And I love solving problems.
Fantastic. Let's just get right into it. What is chargebacks?
So a chargeback is a transaction that has been reversed, and this actually happens when the customer goes to their bank and they dispute the payment. So what happens is that the money is put on hold until the case is decided, either a win or a loss. And this can happen for various reasons. It can be because of fraud, because of service-related issues. That can be services not as described, can be cancelled services, and also it can be duplicate processing, whereby people can initiate two transactions. And also we have something called friendly fraud. This happens like someone just consumes the service or receives the goods, but they end up saying not to have received a service or goods. So that's why we call it friendly fraud, but it's not friendly to the merchant.
Oh, fantastic. So just listening to you, I am picking various types of chargebacks.
Yes.
There is what you're referring to as the friendly fraud. There's the actual fraud. There's the either merchant or service related fraud. Please, just in depth, would you describe each of them and the scenarios in which they happen?
So for fraud, there's that we call fraud, which is when someone maybe steals a card and then they make a transaction using the card. So that means the card holder is not aware of the transaction. So that is a legitimate fraud transaction. But when we refer as friendly fraud, that means someone went and received goods or consumed a service, but they went ahead and disputed the charge as not to have known about it. So it's a legitimate transaction, it's a legit transaction, but the customer goes ahead and says it's fraud. But they have actually enjoyed either the service or received the goods.
Okay.
Yes.
That's the friendly fraud.
Yes.
People actually do that.
Yes, so they know.
Yeah.
So there are people who do that for fun. I saw a video, someone saying they do disputes for fun.
Really?
Yes.
With all the energy and effort
Yes.
it requires of you.
Yes, so it hurts merchants because
Okay.
at the end of the day that is losses, that is a financial loss, but there are people who do that.
So with the friendly fraud, how then do you tackle it? Probably with an example. How would you then dispute and ensure that it is resolved?
So for friendly fraud, we ask the merchants to provide compelling evidence.
Okay.
Compelling evidence means that they need to provide, if there was merchant and customer communication, maybe when they were booking a service, or maybe they received a good, there has to be a delivery note. So we have to have that evidence that that transaction took place and they actually consumed or received the goods. So we urge them to keep a receipt of what they have provided, and maybe if it's a service like a hotel, we need to have the sign-in check-in form or check-out form, just to make sure that signature there is for the customer. And also what I've seen or what happens is sometimes this for merchants, they don't put proper descriptors of payments that customers do. So at the end of the day, when a customer checks their statements, they see ambiguous words like unclear things, like if you went to purchase something, it doesn't quite describe what you purchased. So at the end of the day, when someone checks the statement or the customer checks the statement, it doesn't click their mind that this is actually something they bought or a service they consume. So one of the things the merchants can do to prevent things like friendly fraud is to have clear descriptors of the payments that they do, or how it appears on customer statements. But here at Network, what we do is when we get such cases, what we need from the, or what Network needs from the merchants is that we need proper documentation, that is compelling evidence, so that we can represent to the bank to try and dispute the payments. That can be proof of service, that can be delivery notes if you're delivering goods to the customer.
Okay. I never thought fraud can be friendly.
Yeah, but not friendly to the merchant.
It's not friendly to the merchant.
Yes.
So I know there's also another type of chargeback or fraud that is not friendly, when it is very actual and fraud is happening. Please explain to us what happens there with event scenarios and how we handle it here at Network.
Yeah, so fraudulent, we have a legit fraudulent transactions, and that is when the cardholder is not aware about the transaction that has been made.
And I've had instances where, for example, a son takes the dad's card. Is that still fraud? Does that guarantee like a chargeback to the merchant?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So we have instances where, like, let's say I'm a mother, I have a child, so my child takes the card and they pay for something online. So later on, as a mom, I realize that, no, I have some money missing here. Then when I trace in the statements, I find that there's something that has been purchased without my knowledge. So they can dispute it. They just lodge a dispute, and then we go through like that process is the one that we just follow for disputes and everything.
All right, so there's a whole process for disputing a chargeback,
Yes.
and also in terms of fraud. Please take us through the chargeback cycle. How does that look like?
Yeah, so the chargeback cycle starts with the customer. So the customer goes to their bank and disputes a payment. So what happens after that is now the card issuer, that is the cardholder's bank, they'll communicate it to the acquirer. So our acquirer will let us know about the chargeback. So this is where we as Network come in. We communicate the chargeback to the merchant. So this is what we do. We log it in the system, so they get automated notification telling them about the chargeback. So it tells the merchant about the transaction details, when it happened, and what they need to provide. So we have a list of what they need to provide for each chargeback. So what they need to give us is compelling evidence, and then when they send it to us, we send it to the bank. That is what we call representment. So we try dispute the dispute on behalf of the merchant.
Okay, so Network is the in-between.
Yes, Network.
The customer and the merchant.
Yes.
We've discussed about friendly fraud. We've discussed about actual fraud. What happens when the error is by the merchant and it's either product or service related? How do we handle that here at Network?
Okay, so here at Network, we advise the merchants to always refund if there's any error that they have realized they have done.
Okay.
So that is what we actually advise them as Network to do. So for example, someone ordering online, like you or me, would order a shoe size 39,
Okay.
but the merchant, because there was no size 39 and thought, I have 38 and a half, so they'll pack the 38 and a half and send it to the customer. So the customer now returns it and said, no, I ordered 39, why am I having 38 and a half? So they'll go to their bank and dispute as that maybe not as described. because that is not what they wanted. So in this case, what we advise as network for the merchants to do is to be very proactive in communication with the customers. If they raise a complaint that they need the shoe returned, then they just return it without the chargeback being raised. So that's what we, as network, we advise the merchants. But when it has happened already, then if the case is legit, they provided a shoe that is not their size, then they'll have to accept that chargeback.
Right. So as a card holder or as a customer, and it could be both even for merchant, what is the most adequate evidence you can provide to dispute a chargeback?
So depends, it's what type of chargeback. So if it's, let's for example give it's you've gone and booked a service. Let's say you've gone into a hotel and you have received the service, you've been there and the services were good. Some even leave good reviews. So, we can get even that review from the merchant. They're saying that the stay was perfect, and also you can get the sign in and check out form. So they sign that they were there. So that is an evidence. And also very important is communication. So there's that constant communication between the merchant and the customer. Maybe I'm arriving at this date, who will pick me at the airport and such like stuff. So those are just some of the examples that we actually need. We call it compelling evidences. And also if the customer left their identification there and they took maybe pictures of their passports or ID card, then we also ask for that.
Okay, so you've talked of proof of delivery of probably the items of the service, the communication. Are screenshots valid? Can I take a screenshot of a WhatsApp message, for example?
Yes, we receive that,
Okay.
and we actually send it to the bank.
Okay.
We just have to verify, like the communication is what we are talking about here. Like if it was a service and they were going to a hotel, or maybe that product they were asking for, it's what they are talking about. You can actually just see a screenshot that is not related to whatever we are talking about there. So as network, what we do is just to ensure the documents are okay, like they are in sync with what we are representing to the bank as network.
Okay. What about, there's an instance, and I was reading online, where someone had actually just signed the terms and conditions. They didn't read through the terms and conditions. Is that a valid or a compelling evidence to use?
Yes, a very good one.
Okay.
So we've as network, we've won cases on behalf of merchants just by that signing the terms and conditions.
So it's important to always
Very,
include
very
the policies and the terms and conditions.
Yes.
This is very educative and insightful. So how do chargebacks hurt businesses or merchants in this case?
Okay, so chargebacks hurt businesses, one, because that is loss of money. Remember, when a customer disputes a transaction, that means they need their refund. And you might have provided the services and also gave out the products. And also there's a lack of cash flow, because now you don't have money in your account, like the merchant doesn't have money in the account. And also something else is when you have high rate of chargebacks as a merchant, then you can have your account terminated and you cannot use the service anymore.
All right. We earlier spoke about how to contest the chargebacks, where you have the proof of delivery, you have the signed documents, you have the screenshots of the communication. Yet here is a card holder or a customer who still insists that that transaction either didn't happen or they didn't receive the service. What are the next steps?
So when a customer still insists that, or a card holder insists that the chargeback is legit because it was a fraudulent transaction, then that means at that stage we have received a communication from the bank that is called pre-arbitration. So that means that the cardholder still disputes it as fraud. So at this point, we as network, we let the merchant know that this is the communication that the bank has sent to network. So what we do is just send that communication to the merchant, and the merchant now will come back to network and say, no, this was a legit transaction, and we are not going through with that, and we want to go to the next step, which is called arbitration. But now arbitration attracts fees. So we have fees accumulating to $850. So in this case, it means as a merchant, you have to part with $850 plus, you have that chargeback amount. So in case as network and you as the merchant, we try and defend this case into the arbitration process, and the case is lost, then the $850 is lost plus the chargeback amount.
Oh, wow.
So in most cases, as network, we advise that we don't go to this stage because of the costs. But however, we have, as a network, what we do, we can always suggest that the merchant goes to another step called good faith. So in good faith, we just, as network, we reach out to the bank in good faith, and we let them know that the merchant wants to again bring another evidence or additional evidence to show that this was not this was a legit transaction, and it was not fraudulent as the customer explains. So that is what we do as network. But what we have to say as network is that we don't usually have influence over these cases. What we do as network is just to ensure that all the evidences have been provided. We have supported the merchant as we can, but the case or the decision usually lies with the issuing bank.
Oh, fantastic. So who is mostly the arbitrator? Because the card holder, the issuer bank, the acquirer bank, the network, we're all parties, and I think we need more of a third party, a neutral party. Is there like a neutral party in the arbitration process?
Yes, yes, because now both cases has to be looked into. What our merchant as network is bringing and what the card holder is bringing. So there has to be a third person who has to check all the evidences and decide. Because as we said, it's not a cheap process.
It feels like a whole process. Does it have timelines, a window in which you should dispute a chargeback or receive a chargeback?
Yes, it does have a window. So for us, when we receive, as a network, we receive the chargebacks from our carrying bank, then we are given 7 days, up to 7 days to provide evidence. So within those 7 days is when we communicate to our merchants about the chargeback, so that we can give them time to gather the evidence. Sometimes, especially for airlines, they'll go to their agents and ask them to give also the evidences. So there has to be that timeline to provide compelling evidence. So when we get that evidence, we send it to the bank. So we have, so as network, when we represent the case, there's that 30 to 60 days when we receive the feedback. So sometimes we can receive before the 60 days, and we just communicate it to the merchant, let them know how the case is going. And then at that point, we can get now the pre-arbitration.
Yeah.
So now that's when the merchant will decide if they want to go further. So we just have a ruling if it's lost or won. So we communicate that. If it's won, then remember that charge is just put on hold. It's not returned to any party until the case is ruled. So when the case is ruled, that's when, if it's a won case, then we just return the money to the merchant.
All right. What happens if I miss that window? Do I lose the money? Do the merchant especially, do they lose the money?
We have cases where the merchant sees the communication late. So they'll contact network, and what we do as network is just to reach out to the bank and ask them, hey, we just received the documents. We'd like you to represent in good faith, because we know the window is already lapsed. And they do that, and in some cases we've won on behalf of the merchants, but we don't encourage that, because there are some banks who are very tight on the deadlines. If we miss that deadline, then that is our lost case. Yes.
And that's closed.
That's closed.
There's
and that
no
is money
other
lost.
higher level. That money is lost.
No, we have very strict timelines.
Okay. Wow. Then I think it's important to know the timelines. It is important to be aware when you're requested of all this evidence and documents to share. And for me, maybe just to explain to the merchant, how then do we prevent chargebacks? Because I think here prevention sounds better than going through the chargeback process. Yeah.
So as a merchant, how they can prevent chargeback is, for, let's say, for fraudulent chargebacks, we have that 3DS, where there's that extra security layer that prevents fraudulent chargebacks, which are the most common and they are the most hard to win. So that means money lost. For service-related chargebacks, they have to have terms and conditions in place at any given time. They also have to have clear description of the payments. That is how the friendly fraud happens, when people don't remember what they were purchasing, and the description don't really tell a story about what they purchased or a service they received. And also communication is very key. If a customer raises a complaint, the merchant has to be really, really fast in responding to avoid chargebacks. And I think that's it. They should just have compelling evidence, and also just to avoid to have those chargebacks, be very good in communication, because that's where it starts. Maybe a customer returns to the merchant and says, I didn't appreciate this service, or I didn't like this product. So they have a way of solving them, like without the customer going to the bank and disputing it.
All right. Nyambura, I've also heard of one process where you can use to mitigate chargebacks, and these are the refunds. Would you kindly speak to that?
Oh, yes. One of the ways to mitigate chargebacks is doing refunds. So, for example, an airline cancels flights because of natural disasters, or maybe an event is rescheduled. Then that means there's likelihood for the customers to raise chargebacks if they don't receive their refunds on time. So we as network have enabled our merchants to do that refunds on the system. And if they have any difficulties, they can always contact our customer service team, and they can guide them on the refund process. So refunding actually just avoids the chargeback process. And also, if you have so many chargebacks as a merchant, then that means more fees, more chargeback fees, and that is also money lost. So we as network advise the merchant to refund before that happens. And also, in some cases, some customers are very quick to dispute the charges. So they raise chargebacks, but already the merchant has already refunded. So what we just need from the merchant is a proof of refund, or as network, we have a way we can get the proof of refund if they have done it on our system. So we just go ahead and represent that to the bankers as already a refunded transaction.
Ah, great. Yes. So a merchant is able to initiate a refund on their portal.
Yes.
How long does that take? If for example, I've raised or I've queued in a refund today, how long does that take to reflect to a card holder?
Okay, so ours is automatic as a network, but it's important to note that some banks, their reversal and their refund process is different, so it might take more days.
All right, thank you so much to everyone who's able to join us on this episode. Please keep sharing your questions, any comments down on the comment section. We are also going to share our contact details, our email, our phone, number. They're all ready, and you can reach us and ask any questions pertaining chargebacks. Thank you. Until the next one. Bye-bye.